Hey guys, TC Mabe here with TC Gaming. I wanted to bring you part 4 of our Exploring Action RPG series. And what I'm going to do again with this video as I go through this, I'm not really going to be paying too much attention to any live chat if there happens to be any. And I'll put that together towards the end to try and answer any questions just in case, again, people are following along for this and don't want to really interrupt that for too long and derail everything. So in our previous videos, we of course created our project from the Action RPG. I've had a couple of feedback comments in the videos regarding the Action RPG series, and the biggest thing that comes up is whether or not we're going to be getting into C++ in this series, and the answer is no. We're not going to be getting into the C++ aspects of this. The Action RPG kit has plenty of things available for you to learn from right out of the box, and the only thing you really need the C++ for is if you wanted to extend any of the capabilities or things that are in there. You might want to add in attributes and things like that. And there's plenty of documentation and tutorials and videos out there to help you through that if that's the path you want to go down. This is geared more towards the beginning user, and the reason I'm using the Action RPG kit is as we talk about fundamental concepts of things like retargeting or creating new blueprint functions and things like that, I thought it would be nice to have a project that you could actually play and see the outcomes of those things as we're changing them. So just want to give you a little bit of background on that to put your mind at ease. We won't be venturing off into C++ land anytime soon. Now, the other thing is I color-coded my project files last time. I talked about that. And we also had imported the Medieval Dungeon package and our craft resource icons. And in the previous video, we started making some of our level transition scenes and things like that with our animation editor for the sequencer. So if you haven't had a chance to catch up to this part yet, please go back and visit those previous videos and check them out. And we'll get right into this one. Now, what we want to do, there was not really into the fun stuff yet per se, but the game is going to need a way to manage our transitions from map to map. The core sample comes with one map, and you're playing in this small area and you go through a wave of about 4 or 5 different creatures or whatever. And we've cut ours down a little bit just to make it a little faster. But you need to kind of go somewhere from there. So that's why we set up this other map that we were transitioning to with our medieval dungeon. And I had talked a little bit before about maybe changing over how that works. So tonight we're going to be getting into a little bit with structure files and a little bit with data tables, and then calling data from those data tables to pass on to our maps. We're going to create a couple of variables that we will be updating as we go through our game to tell us to move on to the next map or the next wave. And we're going to clean up a couple things that we had set up previously just to make this a little bit better. So let's get into that. Now I want to show you 2 other things real quick. These tips were brought to me by one of my users, not one of my users, but one of the people that watches the channel, who has also joined the Discord, brought this tip to me about this thing called collections. And there's a little button that's normally up around here somewhere that has this little icon on it that'll give you a collection. And you can go and create a new collection. And what this will do is it'll allow you to take things that you use a lot of the times and group them together under kind of a shortcut key. And then there's also another one up here called favorites. So for favorites, for example, for me, I'm in the blueprints folder quite a bit. So if you right click on blueprints, you can go in here and say add to favorites. And so now I'll have a little spot up here that no matter where I'm at, if I want to get back there pretty quick, I can just go boom, I'm right back in my favorites for blueprints. What a collection will do is a lot of the times I find myself bouncing around inside of like the game instance and the game mode and the character and things of that nature. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a collection by hitting add a collection, and we'll make this a local one. And I'm just going to call this like, frequent or whatever. And when we go to our blueprints folder, we can now right click on any of these things in here and add them to that collection. So again, I'm going to go ahead and put in our BP game instance. I'm going to right click on it, go to manage collections, and just click that little frequent box. And it'll say added 1 asset to frequent, and you'll see it over here that we have a counter now of 1. I'm going to do the same thing with BP game mode. I'm going to say frequent, add that there, and I'll do the same thing with my player character, manage collections, and just add that to frequent. So now you see I have 3 things in here. So again, if I'm out here bouncing around, I want to get back to those real quick, I can just go right here and filter that in, or if I have other stuff that's in that area that I need, I can also go back to my main blueprints folder. So again, that tip's brought to us by Maximus. He's one of the followers there of the channel, and he's also hanging out in the Discord. Feel free to pop into the Discord and talk to him. He's got a lot of information, might be able to help you out with something you're struggling with. Also some other people in the community. Let's move on into the video. So what we are looking at here is in our game mode stuff and in our instances. I'm going to open these up. And we're going to kind of look through some of the things that we need to do for our level transitioning. Now, I popped the first one open. I'm going to minimize that. Go back and double left click the next one. That's going to bring that into the same editor. Minimize, and I'll open up this last one. And now I have 3 of them in the panel, and I'll just go ahead and blow that up a little bit. And what we're looking at here in the game instance section, for example, we have our level loading logic that I had shown you briefly on the screen, but we didn't really talk too much about it. And in here, I was just kind of bypassing some things to get this up and running. And I just had a simple selection in here that had each level. And I said if we met a condition where, you know, the thing didn't match endgame, that it would follow off to this branch. And if it ever hit the condition of endgame, it would just go out to the game over branch. Well, I want to handle this in a little bit more elegant way because this is kind of clumsy. And the other thing is it's not very sustainable for long-term use. If we wanted to have a bunch of different maps and a bunch of different spawn groups and things like that and shake things up a bit, we could do that a lot more efficiently in a thing that's called a data table. So if we want to see a really good example of how this can be used in the project, and this is what I do, I look for things that make sense that are already in the project, and I try and replicate those into my own usage. So if you go into the BP game mode section in here under the enemy manager, what you should find in here is that when they're doing the wave manager, and this is a similar type of thing, as I'm playing, I have different wave groups that come through. So what this does is it gets a data table row from the waves progression data table. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'll blow it up a little bit. So it goes in and gets a data table row from the waves progression table. And all it does is it appends a value to a variable. Now this variable, excuse me, is an integer. If you're not real familiar with variables, basically what they are is they're containers for data, and then they're typically given a type. So in this case, they're integers, which are numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can also have floats and things like that if you need more precision for your numbers. But in this case, we're just looking for 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we have is a variable here called current wave. And the current wave variable will be incremented down the road here. And it'll also be appended in this case with a prefix. And the prefix of this is going to be wave underscore. So imagine our current wave comes in and its value by default right now is set, if you look over here in the variables, current wave is set to 1 by default. So what this will do is append wave underscore to the front end of current wave value, which is 1. So we get wave underscore 1 here as the output of this. And that passes over the row name as wave underscore 1 to this data table, or to this call for getting the data table row. And then what it does is it says if we found that row, if there is a wave underscore 1 row in that data table, then we go ahead and set a couple of things into existence and we spawn our next wave based on that number. If we don't find that row, then we process the onAllWavesFinished function, which goes down and tells us we're out of waves to do, and we go on the next thing. Well, that's kind of where our game picks up, is we say if all the waves are finished, you know, we want to go over here and load another game level, and loading a game level takes us back over to our game instance where we're calling the next level in here. So I want to use the same exact type of structure that we're using over here in the enemy manager of getting data table rows. So what we're going to do is we're going to go look at how this works, and then we're going to build that. And it's going to get a little bit heady, but you know, you can always pause the video, take a look at what's on the screen in front of you and try and duplicate it. And if you have issues, just leave comments and we'll go through them, and I'll try and make this as painless as possible as we go through this. And like I said, this isn't the fun part, but your game needs structure. You need to be able to load levels. You need to be able to restart levels when you die. You need to be able to bounce back around in your menu system and things like that. So you're kind of building a framework. And then later on, we get into the more interesting stuff like creating new weapons and monsters and all that kind of stuff. But these are all the things that you would have to do to build any kind of game, really, if you're going to make something out there that's going to work. So what we're going to do is go and minimize ourselves out into this area. And again, I talked about where I like to go to my favorites for blueprints. So I'm going to go in here and go to that blueprints folder. I'm already in here, but I have this filter on, so I'll just go blueprints from here. And in our blueprints, we have a folder that's called progression. Now that progression stores the data table for our waves progression. And you see here, I made a duplicate of mine. So the original waves progression actually looked like this in mine. And in yours too, it probably still looks like this if you haven't updated it. Excuse me, but it has this row name value. And the row name is wave underscore 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then it tells it in this string that's in here. And we don't need to know anything about how this actually got in there or works or whatever. We can build that in our structure. But it just goes and grabs all the values that you've specified, loads them into an array, and pulls them up and does some other things. And we're not going to get deep into those weeds. We're just going to build something similar. So if we go back out here and we look at our waves progression, the other thing we see that's called waves has a structure. And if we go to the wave struct, all this is it's telling the wave table what type of data is going to be handed into it, and what the names are, and things like that. So we want to build something, again, I keep closing that and I don't know why. We want to build something similar to that, and we're going to do it right here in the progression, and we're going to use ours for maps. So in our progression folder, we're just going to right click, and we want to go down to the blueprints advanced asset section. So it says create advanced asset, go down to blueprints, and we have a thing down here called a structure. Now in this structure, we're going to call this map underscore progression, and then I'm just going to call it underscore struct for struct. So map progression struct. And I'm going to open that up. And it's going to have this little window in here to tell us we have a member variable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to map underscore name. Just like that. And I'm going to change its data type. Now, if you go back to the other section in here where we're in our blueprint, I'm going to leave this here for a second, map progression struct. If you go back to this instance where we were calling our map up, what it's looking for is a level name, and that level name is of type name. See, it says level name and then name underneath of it. So that's telling you the variable and the data type right there. So in our map progression structure, we also want to pass that a name. So if we open this up, we can go down and change our data type to name. Now, the reason I'm only putting map underscore name in here, this one value, is because a structure always has at least one column in it, which is called row name. And so you'll see what we're going to do here in a second. If I save this, just like this, map underscore name with a variable of name, I'm going to close that, and then I keep closing that other window too. But I'm going to go over here and get into an area where I can go and put in another type of table. And to get this, I want to go into the miscellaneous. So under create advanced assets, we go down to miscellaneous. And now what we want is a data table. And there's two different types. There's a composite data table and a data table. You want to pick data table for this because we're using something very simple where we're just going to create a list. The composite data table, I think, has the ability to take various data tables of a similar type and merge them together so that you can have a master data table. And we might get into that down the road, but I don't think we will. But we're just going to grab a data table, and what it asks for is a row structure. Well, that's why we built this map progression struct. So if we click the drop-down arrow, we can go down here and look for map progression struct. And I don't know why it comes up with two of them. Most of these have two options, but they're both the same thing if you look at them. So I'm just going to grab the first one. Oh, not global option struct. I'm going to grab the first one for map progression struct that we just created. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to call this, this is our map underscore progression. And now I'm going to hit save all. I'm going to go into map progression. And again, I've got this data table section here. And we expand this out a little bit. I'm going to go in here and hit add. And I get one new row. And my row name, I'm going to call map underscore 1. And then our map name value, we're going to give it a map name from one of our folders. So let's go and look for one of our map names. We can go out here to maps. This is the map that starts the game. And if I go out here, the main one's called, the first level is called Action RPG _ P. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to click on it, Control C to copy that value. And then I'm going to go back into this blueprint section, and I'm just going to paste that name in there. Now, put it right here, and hit Control V. And so what I have now is a row name called map _1 and a map name called Action RPG _ P. And now we have our other map, which was in our medieval dungeon. So let's go in there and we go to that map. And this one's called Dungeon Demonstration. And then remember, I had a map level 2 just as another example. So if you want to, you could actually just call this, since it's medieval dungeon, we can call this medieval dungeon and _ map 1. And we'll just give that a second to rename itself. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that name. So medieval dungeon map _1. We're going to get that name, Control C to copy that. And we're going to go back out to our map progression table, and we're going to add another row. And this was going to be called map _2. And the map name value we put down here is going to be called medieval dungeon map 1. So the reason we're doing this is because I can standardize the row name, so I can iterate through this. Iteration is just looping through something basically and incrementing a value. But I can go through here and I can pick map 1, map 2, map 3 in a linear column here, and just return back a name of any map that's anywhere in our world, no matter what it is. And by setting it up this way, we can use that little exit function. So if I call for map 3, let's say I only have 2 levels of my game, and that loop goes out and looks for map _3, it's not going to find a map _3 in here just yet. So it'll exit this branch of code and elegantly shut the thing down and say, well, we're all out of levels. Let's go to the end game routine. Okay. So we want to save that. We have our map progression now. And I want to go back to our blueprint section, and we're going to look at what we have to do to update this in our value. Now, again, I can go back to the blueprints folder. I already have some of these open down in here. So I'm going to go back to looking at our game instance where we have our level loading logic. Okay. And what we want to do in our level loading logic now is to make use of some of these things to call this right in here where this is all going to work out. Now, I could leave some of these things in here to do this, but I think it's probably best if I just go ahead and delete everything from here. Let me just click off that. Everything from here over. I think we'll just delete that and rebuild it. So, and if you're not familiar with how to move this around, I'm right-clicking in here and creating that little hand icon so I can drag stuff around. And then the mouse wheel zooms you in and out, and the left button allows you to highlight things and select them or move them. And when you right-click in here, it creates your little all actions for this blueprint. Now, one of the things I mentioned in the previous video briefly is that in Action RPG, you have a couple of things that are not context sensitive to these blueprints because they're actually created in C++ code that's outside of the core engine, so to speak. That's done by design. They didn't want to weigh the engine down with things that weren't going to be used by a lot of the people that were making games. But anyway, coming in here for this out of the fade in from the screen here, we want to go in here and start to put in our different load level logic. So coming in out of here, what we want to do is try and get that data table row. So coming out of here, we're going to say get data table row name, and get our data table row name. Or here, actually, let's do this. Let me show you another way. Let's go back up to our game mode over here for our enemy manager. And what we'll do is, since we're just going to be basically duplicating this section, I'm going to grab this because this is the same thing except we're going to change this variable. So let's just grab this, highlight these, and we're just going to say Control Copy. So I hit Control and C. I can go back to this game instance and just left click out here somewhere and hit Control V and it'll paste this in. Then I can move this into position over here and we can start building off of it this way. And if you want to move this box over so that you have something underneath of it, you can do that too. So what we're going to do is we can just simply change our wave progression here, but we're going to come out of fade in and show loading screen is going to come out to get data table row, and then you give it the name of whatever it is. So ours is going to be called map underscore progression. And so now it's going to be called get data table row map underscore progression. And we just bring our branch of our execution pin into that. And our append value is going to be map underscore with a capital M, and everything else is lowercase. And then we need a value here, which is not going to be called current wave. This is going to be called our level index. And we had that in there from last time, but if you don't have it, you just go to variables, click variable, and then go down and type in variable name is going to be level index. And over in this sidebar in your details panel, you pick your variable type and you just drop down and go to integer. So level index integer gets created there. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the level index. And we're going to set its value here to 1. So that's going to be its default value. And to get this out here, all you do is left click on it and drag it out into the level. And that's going to give you an option for a get or a set. So we're going to get the level index. And we're going to take this current wave value and delete it. And we're going to bring our wave index down just like that. So level index, move these around a little bit. Our level index is going to get appended to map underscore. And then that value is going to come out here into this row name. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the row found in here and we are going to add in an incrementer, and we're also going to put another variable in here, and that variable is going to be called current. I think I was calling this current level name. So we're going to go over here and create a new variable. Excuse me, and I'll explain this in just a second, but we're just going to build it right now. So we have a new variable here. It's going to be called current level name. So we create it, and then we just go over here and change it, and its variable type is going to be name. Excuse me. All right, so current level name. And then we want to go over here, and coming out of this, if the row's found, we're going to set an increment. So we go get data table row. If the row is found, what we want to do is increment our level index. So you type in increment, and you should find an increment integer. And the thing that we want to increment is our level index. We'll drag this back out, and we're going to set that level index. And we're going to set it to the value of, whoops, wait a minute, level index plus 1. Sorry, you don't need that. You just need this. The level index is already implied as the plus here. And then I know it's going to be a little confusing, and hopefully there's a lot of questions and it leads to something that helps you guys out with this. But if you just go slow through here and follow the end results, we should be good. And I may even have to, I'm referring to some of my notes here, I may even have to go over and grab some other things to help get this out there, because it's hard to just look at pictures on your notes. So we increment that level index, and then we also want to come out of the row for this table. And when you pull a pin out of here and drop it out on the world, you get an opportunity to go here and do a thing called break map progression struct. And if you hit this, what it does is it pulls out whatever's in the structure. Now, in our case, we only have one thing called map name. But if we had multiple values in here and you break the struct, it would give you a list of all the things that are in that structure. So in ours, we want to come out and get that map name, and that's what we're going to be passing over to our level name and opening the level from there. So basically fade in, show the loading screen, go out to the map progression table, get a map underscore level index, go and find out what the map name is associated with that row. We're going to pass that value into our current level name. So we're going to set the current level name with this input. And then once we set that level name, we're just going to use that to go over here and open level. And that value wants a level name, which we're going to supply from right here. Okay. So that should allow us, if everything goes well, that should allow us to go fade in, show the level screen. And that's part of a loading thing that they did to optimize some stuff. We can explain that later. Again, get the data table row from map progression, which we created with our structure. Prefix it with map underscore. So right now it's map underscore 1. We go to map underscore 1 and we look that up and we return our map name, put that into our current level name variable, and then we're going to open that level. Now the reason we are capturing this current level name is because we have another thing in here where if we have to restart the game, which is, I think there's a restart in here somewhere, where whenever you die, restart game level. So if we want to restart the game level that we're going to restart is going to be whatever our current level is. So we can just drag this one down in here and say get current level name. And this is load game level. So we want to change this to open level. Take this out. Should be able to say open level. And then our open level is also going to use that current level name. Now this just probably got a little crazy for everybody, so let me slow this all down again. I know I'm repeating myself, but I really want you to understand the functions of what we're doing here. So when we call our load game level, we go in and show our loading screen, get the data table row, add map underscore to a level index variable of currently 1. So map underscore 1, we look that up in that row table. We pull back our current level name, and we pass it to the open level function. Okay? Once we open that level, we're going to go and play it. And then if we die in that level, we're just basically going to come in here and get that current level name again and start back up. Now, over here by incrementing this level index after we've found the row, we just come out, level index goes up. Now we're 2. The next time this passes through, it's going to be map underscore 2 and get the next row. Now, the only other thing we need to do is we need to say if the row is not found, we need to do something with that. So over here, our function to end the game, or game over mode, is actually in this other BP game mode. So in order to talk to that other blueprint, we have to use something that's called a cast. So we're going to say cast to BP game mode. And cast to BP game mode. And we're going to say as the BP game mode. So if I were in this BP game mode, I want to call a game over function. So we just simply come off of here, as BP game mode. Game over should pull up our call function to game over. And then the only other thing we need in here is an object. Because if you try to compile this, it normally says, oh, you need an object. Well, typically the object of a call or a cast to is an object of the same type that you're casting to. So all we should have to do here is pull off the object and say get BP game mode, which is right there. And that auto connects the pin. And now if we compile, we shouldn't have any errors there. Okay. So rows found, increment our level index, get our current level name out of the structure, open that level. Row not found, go over to the BP game mode and call game over. When game over gets called, it's going to come over here and just follow out through the whole branch of, killing everything and getting you out of the game. Okay. So that's a lot of stuff. Now in the restart, we put our current level name to open the level. We go back in here. Let's show you that again. That's the other change that we made. So it's current open level, go back to current level name. And then the other thing we want to do, I'm going to close a couple of these now. Hopefully you guys got that. Maybe, let me actually, before I close that, Let me just go back in here one more time. And I'm not going to talk about it, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this up on screen and let you look at that structure for a second there so you have a spot to pause. And then I'm going to move it over here to the other section of this so you can see the continuation of it. Give you a spot to pause. And again, this is all found in the BP game instance, and we're loading that under our level loading logic section. Okay. You guys have questions about that, please drop comments in the chat window, and we can talk about it at the end of the video or in the comments after this, or I can even do another live stream in the Discord or something to talk about that. But now what we want to do is we also want to go out and make sure that our game logic is being handled for that in some other sections of our blueprints. So we're going to go back to our blueprints folder, and our main interface out here for the start this and follow that is under a section called Widget BP, which are widget blueprints. And these are all the different little things that are on your screen for interacting with like start game and your little health pickups and your, your potions and all that kind of stuff. We could spend a long time talking about widgets and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into that right now. What I want to do is I want to go over and look at the couple of menus that happen when we start the game. So one of these is going to be called the, let's see, I think it's called main, that's the pause, might be the options screen. No. Where's it at? It's probably staring me right in the face. WB title. Yeah. So WB title calls a start game. So if you just click on it, and again, go do some research on widgets and UI panels and all that kind of stuff and Slate UI. Those are things that you'll get into down the road. So click on Start Game, and you can go over here to the graph for this. And what we want to do is look at the on-clicked events. So you can go over to the graphs. If these aren't shown, you can go over here, and I think you can say Window and show your blueprints in there. Open up the event graph, and you want to go to the on-click Start Game button, which is right here. So if I click Start Game, it's going to go to Game Instance, Load Game Level. Load Game Level does all of our logic, comes over here and gets level index 1 map name, and does all the stuff we talked about earlier and opens up our level. So we want to make sure that that's following the right path, which it appears to be. And then the other one we want is when we end the game. So we've got a game over section here. So in-game finish, we get an opportunity to go back to our main menu. So let's highlight that one and look at our graph. And on main menu button, go to main menu. So if you just double left click this, it'll take you to it. Go to main menu should take you to open the level for action RPG underscore main, which is correct. That is our main level. And we're going to do one more blueprint call in here, which is in the same panel. So I want to go back to designer. You got play again. So I died in the middle of the game and I want to play it again. Go to my graph. Look at my event graph over here for on-clicked, basically the restart button. Restart game level. And restart game level should take me over here and call the fade in for the loading screen and open the level, whatever our current level name was. That's why we stored that value. We died in the middle of the game. We want to go right back where we died from. Okay. So if everything worked and you're getting green checkboxes in your compiles, let's see how this works. Now, one thing I want to do before we do this, I don't want to go through this big massive wave here. So I'm going to go temporarily back into our progressions. And in our wave progression, I'm just going to go ahead and say duplicate this. I got a wave progression 2. So now I got wave progression 1 was our original. Wave progression 2 was our slightly modified version where we were just trimming it down some. We're going to go to wave progressions and we're going to trim it down even further. So I'm just going to remove these first 2 waves and save that, so that I only have to beat one little round of enemies to go to the next level in here. Okay. So let's see how this works. If I go to, let's go back temporarily to our UI, or to our, blueprints. And we want to go to our widget BP. Is there another one in here for... I don't think options takes you in there. There's a skip intro. That should work, I think. Let me just make sure. Skip intro. On clicked. Skip button. Stop playing skippable cutscene takes you into here, which takes you to a start game, which should eventually get you into starting the enemy spawn and then going through and getting all the other stuff. So I think we're okay with the waves and how everything's going to work. Just want to make sure we don't have something in there that's going to send us where we don't want to be. But again, I said before, we've spent most of our time in these couple of blueprints to get all that stuff going. So I want to go down to our maps, temporarily go to maps. And this would be where we started the game if we started playing. So we're going to save all our selected. And we just hit play from here. And let's see what happens. Turn my volume down some for you. Okay, so if I go in here and hit start game, takes me into my first montage. Working so far. I come in here, I got my character. So my wave 1 progression comes out. Kill this guy. And should just have to beat one wave. Only I think these 3 guys or 4 guys or something. Little micro spawn groups. And my wave should be finished. Now, if everything goes well, I should go to my dungeon level. So there I am going into number 2. Excuse me. Now remember, I only put 2 levels in here. Okay. So we're going to beat this wave. And again, hopefully me rambling on about this is helping in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully I'm not confusing you guys. I know some of you may be beyond this, and some of you may not understand any of it all, and hopefully I'm hitting the middle ground with everybody. Now, if my wave 1's complete and I don't have any place to go, my game's over. Okay? If I want to play again, I should end up back in this same thing because that was my last played map level. Fair enough? So it looks to me like everything is working the way that we would want it to. And I'm going to end that out of there, and I'm going to go up. Now, tonight's live stream, I've only done, 30 some minutes here. But I have just covered quite a bit of information in those 30 some minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end my discussion of the stream here, and hopefully you guys get through all that. I'm going to give you an opportunity to digest it and to ask questions if you have them. And then in our next live stream, we'll start getting into some more functionality. One of the things to think about in here is that using that simplistic, well, it'll be simplistic once you get your head wrapped around it for sure, but using this method of our level logic here, if you think about where this is headed, you have a map progression table here that's being called from a data table. And you see that that's a variable that you could actually plug in how you want to call that. Instead of calling it map underscore progression, it could be called, wilderness progression, dungeon progression, castle progression, whatever it is. You could have different progression tables that you loop through to pass to this to call up map names within those progression tables. And in theory, you could nest those together with variations on your game mode calls to the waves. So in your enemy manager in here, you could also have a series of progressions. So you could have a castle progression, a wilderness progression, a dungeon progression, and then you can go into each of those progression tables and create different types of enemies and different types of spawns for different locations. And by using this very, very simplistic view of a couple of data tables, you have a way to manage multiple levels, multiple enemy groups, and all that kind of stuff in a very simplistic and concise way. And you don't have to go hunt and peck around to put in this big, long string list of maps out there. You just do it in a data table. Now, I did say I was going to end this stream, but I do want to show you one more benefit of the data table. And I don't want to lose anybody here. So again, pause the videos, come back and watch these. But Data tables also have the benefit of being something that you can take out and edit somewhere else. So remember our waves progression 1 had our first batch here. So let me show you, if you just right click on this, you can actually say export this as a CSV file, which stands for comma separated values. And I'll just put this out on my desktop and I'll call it, let's see, let's call it, what was it, waves. And we'll just say save. And if I go out to my desktop and look at that Wave CSV, I can just open it with a regular text editor. And what it is it's the spawn group. So there's an empty placeholder for the name. Then there's a spawn group, wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, and then a wave time at the end of this. Actually, this one will get occupied with wave 1. This first comma is on the left here. Spawn group will be all these things that are getting passed over in the string. And then all the way over here on the right-hand side, you're going to find the very last thing is the time. So 60 seconds here, 60 seconds on this other one, so on and so forth. But what's nice about these is if you wanted to go in and create a spreadsheet, you could actually go in here and populate this data in a spreadsheet. And then this is maybe a bad example of something that you could edit out here, but you could take this in, and when you're done, you could actually go back in here and right-click and say, re-import with new file or re-import. And when you do that, you can actually update the structure of these things. Like if I had a list of maps that I already knew what their names were going to be and this, I could dump this out and edit it. And this would probably be an easier example to digest. So let's say export as CSV, and we'll just call this maps. And we'll do the same thing. I'll just show you a simpler structure. If I go out here and look at date modified maps, so there's your simple structure. So placeholder and then map underscore name. So I could literally come in here and say map underscore 3, comma, and then give it my name. So let's say I had medieval dungeon underscore map 2 or whatever. And I could do this into I could put this into like a spreadsheet, and I could just fill these values down and save that. And when I bring this back over, map CSV, I should be able to right click on this and say, that's not let me do re-import, but normally you could, or maybe you have to do it in here. Asset, re-import map progression. And then I can just pull up maps, and now you can see it loaded my new value in there. So I can actually edit this external and then bring that in. So I'm going to remove that because we don't actually have that in there. But it's a really interesting way to populate large data tables. An example would be if you had a spreadsheet from a game you were playing 1,000 years ago, and you already had all the information in there for like a lookup table for armor classes and weapon types and blah 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 blah. You could populate it very quickly using these data tables and structures. So again, my name's TC Made with TC Gaming. And hopefully this has helped you out in some way. Look forward to additional tutorials covering the Action RPG series. And again, Action RPG is just the background that we're going to be working in to cover some more complex topics with an output of actually being able to play something at the end of it to see how it works. So you guys have a great day. Thanks again for watching, and look forward to seeing you guys again real soon.